Yeah. Let's try to tell you smell. We didn't know you ever wore contacts or glasses. What topics do you today? Anyone have some that you want me to go over, or specific questions you have? Yeah, Ari.
Expansion?
Huh?
Westward expansion.
Westward expansion. That's a good one. There's actually a DBQ. Oh, did I give you that one or no?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go over that. Westward. That's yes. Yeah.
I just think the development of the original colonies, like the governors and each.
Oh, you want yeah. Okay. The regions of the colonies and who you got to associate with each. So, Colonial America. I will tell you that Colonial America only constitutes about 8% of the total test, or 9%. So it's important to know the who, what, when, where. But every once in a while they'll sneak in a DBQ. I can't imagine they'll do another DBQ. There were fits about that DBQ. But it would be, yeah, definitely something worth going over. Any other things? Yeah, James.
Did you talk about like the important stuff that happened between 1870 and 1900?
Oh, yeah. Gilded Age?
Yeah. That's basically a big gap.
Yeah. Anything else? Okay. Yeah. Between the world wars. So Roaring Twenties, Great Depression, that time period. Okay, so World War I to World War II. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's start with Colonial America. Yeah.
Oh, we got to go over Fillmore.
I'll spend 30 seconds on Fillmore. Let's start with Fillmore. Fillmore, Compromise of 1850. All right, we're done. It's literally the only thing you would need to know about Fillmore. He signed it. And the only reason that's important is because Zachary Taylor wasn't going to sign it. He said, no, I don't care, Henry Clay. I'm not signing that bill if it comes to my desk. All right. If you have your books, you want to get out your books. Textbooks got some good stuff on Colonial. I got to grab my notes on Colonial America. So I make sure I get the dates right and all the. It's okay. If it's at home, it's not a big deal.
Who names their child Willard?
Hmm?
So who names their child Willard?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. Sweet.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was like, I just forgot his job yet. It was like, here, you like this. And like, the other guy was like, okay,
All right. So let's do this in two parts. I'll do first a timeline of the colonies when they're founded, and you can kind of see the order. You don't need to know the dates of each colony. There's a couple that you need to know. 1607, 1620 are two of the most important. That's Jamestown and Plymouth, respectively. But as far as that goes, it's the things that are important are the regions, how the regions are characterized, and important people for each. So this is the whole timeline. And we'll go 1607. And the last one is Georgia, which is 1732. but most of them happen in this, so this would be like 1660, something like that. All right, so Jamestown is the first of the colonies founded. Jamestown will become the larger colony of Virginia. Jamestown is the first, so it's the first settlement, and then it expands out and branches out, and it will become the colony of Virginia. We'll talk about things associated with it. The next one is 1620, and this is Plymouth. Plymouth plus Massachusetts Bay, that area becomes the Massachusetts colony. Plymouth is relatively small. In fact, you could even write it is most. So Jamestown and Plymouth, 1620, 1607. Massachusetts Bay, though, is the one that you really need to know, which is 1630. This is the most. This is going to be considered the modern Puritan. They call it a city on the hill. We'll talk about the people and how successful it was. In regions. Would that be helpful? Okay. Oh well. Red, blue. I don't think there's any green ones. You can do orange. We'll do black. So Jamestown is going to be a southern colony, so we'll do red. Uh, 1632 is Maryland. We'll talk about Maryland and Lord Baltimore. In 1636, you have two more in the New England colonies, and those are going to be Connecticut and Rhode Island. Plus Rhode Island. This is 1636. In 1663, so now we're jumping over here. This is New York. It becomes part of the American colonies. Does anyone remember what it was before New York? You remember? New Amsterdam. And it was a Dutch settlement. So Henry Hudson is the guy who explores that the what is today the Hudson River.
Haley Davis's ancestor?
Yeah, Haley Davis's relative. She makes a point to let everyone know if you didn't that Henry Hudson is one of her, which is actually pretty cool. So I would say New York is settled. It was formerly New Amsterdam, and it was Dutch. It was a Dutch fur trading outpost. It was very diverse. There was several different languages spoken there. It was relatively laid back as far as how the Dutch were running it. It was a trade outpost. And then it gets invaded by the Duke of York, and it becomes New York. In the same-ish year, we get the Carolinas. This is going to be a southern. So around the same time in the 1660s, just after, Carolina is the colony. I guess we could put it Carolina, and then it'll split into North and South Carolina later on. I think I have that in 1711. So it's after the 1700s, but you don't need to know that. But it was in New Hampshire. So I had one student write New Hampster once on a test. I said this. Have you ever seen the Kia commercials with the hamsters that dance? Yeah. That's the picture I got in my head when I was reading about New Hampshire. Just a bunch of hamsters dancing around. And then 1681 is a very important one, and that's Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania in 1681, William Penn, we'll talk more about that, the Quakers. And then Delaware and New Jersey break off from Pennsylvania. Really, they're offshoots. Delaware and New Jersey, both are going to be considered middle colonies. DE is Delaware, New Jersey is NJ. New Jersey might have been part of New York originally. I think they're both part of Pennsylvania. Doesn't matter, though. They're both in early 1700s, 1704, 1702, and then in 1732 is our last southern one, which is Georgia, which was originally a buffer zone. Any questions on the founding of them? You will never be asked to recreate a timeline. However, you might be asked about the early settlements. These would constitute our early settlements. The two main places that were settled early on in the 1600s are going to be what's today like the Virginia and Maryland region, so kind of where our nation's capital is today, and the New England regions. Those are the two primary places that are going to see. The first slaves are introduced in Jamestown in the early 1620s, so we have the first slaves tending tobacco, and we can talk more about that. Maryland was originally set up as a place for Catholics, a refuge for Catholics by Lord Baltimore. Remember, during this time period in the 1630s, there's a lot of religious persecution going on in Europe. If for some reason you got a long essay question or a short essay question, short answer question, maybe they might ask something. Talk about one similarity between the New England, southern, and middle colonies, or you could talk about how Maryland and the New England colonies of Massachusetts Bay and Plymouth were both established as a refuge for people who were being persecuted for their religious beliefs in Europe. And that's like a very simple, but it's one that it would work absolutely. If you talk about differences, these would be more, their economies are based on agriculture and farming, specifically tobacco here. These are more based on raising livestock. This is not commercial farming here. This is mostly subsistence living. The difference between people trying to get rich and people trying to get away and just live in a little log cabin out in the woods up north and just live their own lives unbothered. Think more Amish-like. The Amish aren't trying to get rich quick. Think more entrepreneurial-like, where people are trying to make money and make businesses, and that's a key feature and difference. The Carolinas are going to be the first people settling there are going to be coming from the West Indies. So like the first people that come to Carolina, they come from the island of Barbados. I don't know if have you ever heard of Barbados? They're looking to for fertile soil and trade and to be able to grow crops like rice and I think the original people that were there were looking to plant sugar, although they realized it wasn't quite ideal in the Carolinas climate-wise. They actually relied on their slaves they brought over to help them plant rice, grow rice, show them how to successfully do so, and then you're going to see larger and larger plantations that grow out quickly by the 1700s. You're not going to have sprawling plantations in places like, Virginia or Maryland right away. That's not like, it's not very, very, very wealthy people that are just going there and looking to establish IKEAs of, tobacco right away. It's a slow evolution. And early on, the labor is not mostly comprised by slaves, it's indentured servants. Do we remember this? Indentured servants get their way paid over. Hi, Haley. We were just talking about your great Henry Hudson.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
And so you have indentured servants who are being paid. They want to make a living. They're trying to come over to this new world. They can't afford the tickets. They work for a term of 7 years. This is also known as the head-right system. Maybe you'll see that vocab word on a test, the head-right system of paying indentured servants to come over. They work for a certain amount of time, and then they're given a plot of land. Usually this plot of land is the worst plot of land owned by the individuals. It's closest to Native Americans. They suffer Native American attacks. They're still expected to pay taxes. they basically, they're living in poverty. They can't do anything. This is the same region where you get Bacon's Rebellion. Did we talk about this? Nathaniel Bacon was a former rebellion against. I think this is have a date on it somewhere. Where is it? Oh, Bacon's Rebellion. Bacon's Rebellion. 1676. And Nathaniel Bacon is going to die in that rebellion, although he's not killed by any planters. We talked about this, didn't we, or no? He pooped himself to death? That guy. He got dysentery. It's not a nice disease. If you ever played Oregon Trail, it's a favorite of the Oregon people to catch. You don't want dysentery. Either you die of dehydration, or literally, in some cases, your lining of your small intestine comes out. So, on a more cheery note, actually, it's not more cheery at all. Actually, on still a downer note, after the indentured servants are causing enough problems, there begins a shift towards slave labor as opposed to the indentured servants. So it's actually getting more and more emphasis on slavery as you go. So if I'm thinking in my head right now, post 1700, and really the last 2 decades in the 1600s, there is a significant shift in southern colonies, especially in the Chesapeake region, which would be North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland, towards slave labor as opposed to indentured servant labor. In the Deep South, what we call the Old South today, which would be Carolina, South Carolina, and places like Georgia and even Louisiana, there is much more heavier reliance on slaves from the get-go. It's not indentured servants. It's mostly, there are some, but it's mostly slave labor. And these are the big sprawling plantations in the Deep South that are going to be associated with rice, and then later cotton. And we know cotton really becomes popular after the cotton gin is invented in the very early parts of the 1800s. Yeah.
Indigo too?
Yeah, and indigo too. I knew it was coming. And indigo too. And so that's regional-wise. The Massachusetts Bay Colony, Plymouth, Connecticut, Rhode Island, their economy is going to pick up as the triangular trade picks up between the Caribbean, the colonies along the eastern seaboard, with Great Britain, and then there's also part of that is Africa and the slave trade. I know I just listed 4 things. So how could there be 4 things if we call it the triangular trade? Well, if this is the United States today, and really we're just looking at these places in here, the Caribbean islands, which are out in here, they were considered one part of the trade, Africa to here. This is the triangular trade. I would take a look at some point in your book at, I think, notes too. I think there's even, I think we took it notes, an image through in which it sugar, raw sugar cane, and sugar would come from here. They would be produced into rum and things like that here. You have Caribbean that would go from the eastern colonies, especially livestock in the New England region. Here, foodstuffs like grain and rice would come from the colonies here to here. You had foodstuffs going. You also a lot of alcohol going and being used for. Remember, we read that article about how rum was used in the slave trade, and it was used for like meeting people as like a customary, like let's start off on a good foot and have a drink, and so you have that triangular trade that built, and that's it's very important. You could see a short answer on the triangular trade. This triangular trade and the flow of people, goods, and ideas all is part of the Columbian Exchange. So the Columbian Exchange starts as soon as the Spanish land in the Caribbean and start exchanging goods, ideas, things with Native Americans. But the Columbian Exchange continues as other countries establish colonies, whether it be the French up in Canada in the northern part of the what would be the United States today, or if we're talking about the Spanish down in Mexico and the Caribbean, or the French Caribbean islands, or if we're talking about the English colonies here. The Columbian Exchange is usually referred to as the exchange between Native Americans, Old World, and Europeans, New World. Does that make sense? So Columbian Exchange really refers to the exchange of culture, good, diseases, those types of things between Native Americans and Europeans. When we talk about the triangular trade, now we're talking about the exchange of goods and trading of goods between colonies and their homelands and also Africa. So that's the subtle difference there. Any questions on this? Do you feel sufficiently, yeah?
Isn't it the other way around where like the New World is the America is the Old World in Europe?
Did I just say it backwards? Let me say that again. Old World is Europe, New World is the Americas and Native Americans. If I said it backwards, you're absolutely right, and thank you for stopping me. Let me say it again. The New World is the one that just got discovered, Native Americans, New World, Old World, Europeans. It's been around, and really, it's kind of, even the fact that we call it New World, Old World shows our perspective on when we tell things from the Europeans' point of view, right? This was new land that just shot up out of the ocean. We just tell it from a very Eurocentric perspective. Any other questions? That's a great question. And I very well may have. Okay. You the people and things that quickly. At any point, if you need to stand up, stretch, go get a drink of water, please do. This is meant to be laid back. And to be honest, this is kind of how I wish I could just run class in general. If you left more than you were here, you just, fail or whatever it would be. It's such a simple, that's why I think a lot of people prefer teaching college, because the people that don't want to show up, don't show up. You know what I mean? The people that are interested, for the most part. Anyways, so let's go through the people and things of that nature. So, let's start with Jamestown. Jamestown. Hi, Jerry. 1607, Jamestown. Important people to know. John Smith, colonial governor of Jamestown. He's considered the one that provides organization and leadership to get Jamestown through its starving time, the quote-unquote starving time. These are the first 2 decades in Jamestown. It was real nasty. Something like, 60 or 70% of the original people that landed were dead within the first 10 years. I don't know these exact statistics. It was bad. In fact, by the way, I don't know if I mentioned it to you guys at the beginning of the year. Do you know that there was one attempt to colonize the eastern seaboard before Jamestown? Roanoke? Okay, so I did, and it failed. They either ate each other, got attacked by Native Americans, or died of, there's no evidence, really. However, I did read a really interesting article, and I don't think I gave it to you, earlier in the year about cannibalism at Jamestown. Did I tell you about this? So they just found evidence. They found a really, really, really old grave in Jamestown, like one of the earliest settlements of parts of Jamestown. And they were looking at the teeth of the people and the bones, and there was evidence of cannibalism in those first years. Like, they were so hungry and starving that they were eating people. And I don't know if they were just sacrificing healthy people, if it was people who weren't doing well or who had already died. I don't know the extent of it, but it was bad early on. So John Smith is the colonial governor, and he also is credited for shifting the focus of looking for gold to, hey, let's survive and start planting some crops and things like that. So he's credited with the colonial governor who turns Jamestown around, and shifting focus from, I think, documentary that we watched, the America's Bus, says they showed up with tests for gold. Why? Oh, good question. Why are they showing up with tests for gold? Why not, why are they not planting for houses or sufficient things like that? Do you remember why?
The Virginia company had them over there to find gold?
Yeah, so they are the first settlers that settled Jamestown. They're being paid by a joint stock company, the Virginia company. They're there to make money. It is of what's going on in America and the Caribbean from the Spanish and these this lavish amounts of gold and coming, and they are looking for gold. It's a joint stock company looking for profits. That is different. That's what we call a proprietary colony, when a company is paying for you to settle. That's different than a royal colony, which is being managed and organized, and the decision-making ultimately rests with the king. These joint stock companies, the owners of the joint stock companies, or the partial shareholders, what it would be called, they lived back in Europe and were expecting to get a return on their investment. That's why they're searching for gold. Hannah, did you have a question?
If it was like this business was like the number one goal, then why did they send like women or children over at all?
So there was very, very, very few women originally in the Jamestown colony, very few. But the ones that are going to be there, it's going to be assumed that like women have a central role in helping a community survive, like that men can't do everything on their own. And there would have been very stereotypical womanly tasks that were given to the women there. But as it evolves over decades, I mean, we're talking like not just like a year or 6 months, but 10, 20 years down the road, as it became more of a permanent settlement, more and more women did come. But it was very highly disproportionately male in the beginning. That's a good question. So John Smith, the next guy, John Rolfe, he introduces tobacco. I think you guys remember him, John Rolfe. It's Rolfe. He's the one that marries Pocahontas, so that's not really relevant to the APUSH test, although I'm sure that if anyone could, they'll write about it. The next thing that you need to remember is what's called the Virginia House of Burgesses. Does this ring a bell? The Virginia House of Burgesses is in 1619. They have their first meeting and founding. So this is early, before even Plymouth Colony is established. It is the first representative government body in the English colonies. It's a representative body. They make decisions about the colony. This is a difference in the nature of this, is it is not directly tied to the church. So the church, these people that are founding Jamestown are not the most religious people. To be popular, the Church of England, the Anglican Church in the Southern colonies, and then later you get more diversity within the Church of England. In the Anglican Church, you're going to get Baptists and Presbyterians and things like that, but that's their and this is going to be something that plays a key role, and it even still exists up until the eve of the Revolutionary War. So Great Britain, the King of England, actually suspends the House of Burgesses and tries to early 1770s. So that's going to be there for a long time, a very long time. The last thing would be tobacco leads to increasing settlement. Increasing settlement leads to worsening relations with Native Americans. And so we talked about this the other day, the Pequot War, and we got to find out where those wars took place. There's King Philip's and the Pequot War. I don't know where each takes place. Can someone, if someone has their textbook, can we look up? We looked it up the other day. Does anyone mind looking in the beginning? It's chapter 2, I think, is what it would be. I said again. Stop me from doing that. There's pizza, by the way. Anyone just came in? Jacob, you want a piece of pizza? Chris, you want a piece of pizza? It's back there. Help yourself. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's New England. What about King Philip's War? It should be on the same page, I think. Oh, that's fine. Hi, how's the meat going?
It's excellent.
You do? If you want a piece of pizza, there's pizza over there. You don't want to Ralph up a hot and ready during your race? Okay, fair enough. What does it say, Isabella?
It says English style and England region.
New England region. Okay, so both of those. I can tell you for sure, the Native Americans that are going to be in conflict here are the Powhatan Indians. This is Pocahontas's people. So should I write that? The so Native American. The main group is the is it POW? Chief Powhatan. If anyone wants to look this up and correct me, I might be wrong on that spelling, but that doesn't look right to me. But
There's an entire category now.
There- that's funny. Was the Compromise of 1850 one of the answers?
It was. So was Franklin.
Franklin presidency. It was tragic. He had I think I told you guys this. There was a bad train accident. His son died. Like his favorite son died right after he was elected. Okay, so that's Jamestown. That's pretty much everything you need to associate with Jamestown. Should I go in order of region, or should I just go in order of the date? We'll do the date. Plymouth. Plymouth would be the next one. Things that you need to associate with Plymouth. Mayflower Compact. Do you remember when we did those maps, by the way, and I had you fill out those maps and color code them? It might not. I know you hated me for that, but it might not be a bad idea to look at those maps again so that you can get a visual representation where each of these colonies are. If you're given a map and it doesn't say the actual name of the town and it tells you, which of the following most accurately reflects the characteristic of point A, like it would be good to know, make sure you have a relative understanding. If you're good with geography, don't worry about it. Mayflower Compact is the agreement signed by those aboard the Mayflower before disembarking and settling Plymouth. It is considered a form of a social contract. It's like an agreement between people. It's a social contract. And you could call it a primitive form of a constitution. It's not an actual constitution, but it's a social contract. Another thing that you should know about Plymouth, William Bradford is the governor, who's going to be a pretty strict guy. Rules almost like he governs almost as a dictator, but he's considered someone who really he has people and he helps. When we talk about the region, when we're talking about Puritans, also Massachusetts Bay. Don't say that word. The economy is subsistence farming. This would be some crops like wheats and grains, as well as livestock, like having a couple pigs, couple things like that. And also on fish, furs, and lumber. Fish, furs, and lumber. Subsistence farming. Fish, furs. Fish, furs, and lumber. Next one would be Massachusetts Bay. Massachusetts Bay. John Winthrop is the guy's name, who's the governor. John Winthrop. This is a very conservative place. It's another word that's you need to know a couple words is the Congregational Church. The Congregational Church is the Puritan Church. The Congregational Church. It is different, absolutely not the same as the Church of England, absolutely not the same as the Anglican Church. It is the Congregational Church, the Puritan Church. This is the New England region. Membership is strict. You have to have you're very devout in your faith, and you have to demonstrate some type of you've had this conversion experience, and the strictness of it and the conservative nature of it leads to declining church membership as you go forward. Yeah, Frank.
Was that formed in England or the New World?
Good question. So, and we were talking about this yesterday, and I don't know if the Congregational Church, if it started in England and transplanted here, or if the first Congregational Church is Plymouth. If someone wants to look it up while I'm going through this, you can. If you don't find it, I'll look it up at the end of the review session because I want to know. I don't know. I just don't know enough about European history and the history of the Congregational Church to know if its seeds grew out of England or not. But if you can look it up, that would be good to know.
I think it started in Europe because that's how they got to the name Congregationalists, because other people called them that.
That's what other people called them. So, and that would make sense. If you had to answer, which you wouldn't on an AP test, then I would go with what Ari said. I think that sounds right too, but we can look it up for sure. On Northrop, Salem, Massachusetts is the center of this colony. So you've all heard of the trials. So Salem, Massachusetts, until 1690s. So that's not going to be for a while. 70 years after its founding. The name tag, the city upon a hill, is what it is deemed. By 1640, they people 20,000 people, which is a lot. I mean, if you think that, I would say Livonia has something like 70,000, so it's about it's somewhere around 40 or 50,000. I bet. So it gives you an idea. 20,000 people is a lot of colonists living there. The next one's going to be Maryland. Things you should know about Maryland. It is founded. How's it going? It's founded by Lord Baltimore. Yeah.
Population of Monroe is 49,000.
49,000. So it's about half the size of Monroe by 1640. So just 10 years. 10 years, it attracts 20,000 people. That's pretty darn good. Do you know why that it attracted so many people so quickly? It wasn't because it was such an awesome place. You could make that claim, but you remember? Well, yeah. So there's more religious persecution going on. The Puritan Church, Puritans are increasingly jailed during that time period. A lot of discrimination going on in Europe during that time. And when things are bad, people flee. So, Maryland, Lord Baltimore. It was established for Catholics. Do you remember this? Mm-hmm. It didn't do a great job drawing Catholics initially. And so it became opened up to anyone. They allowed all Christians to come. It was like a policy. And Maryland, which is considered I'm going to put it in red because it's considered a southern colony, is the first colony to pass an act of religious freedom. It's the Maryland Act of Religious Toleration. So Maryland, they passed the Toleration Act, religious toleration, as early as 1649. So by 1650, we get a colony that's, hey, we're welcome to most religions, all Christians. Its main crop that it's growing and selling is tobacco. It's a tobacco one. Next one would be Rhode Island and Connecticut. Rhode Island colonies. Rhode Island and Connecticut. I'll try and connect. 36, both of them. Connect. Connecticut concept ever in the British mainland colonies. It's called the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. This is a good tidbit of information to know. Fundamental Orders of Colonial First of Colony. First written constitution. Rhode Island is well known for several reasons. Roger Williams is Rodger Williams. Rhode Island becomes famous for its separation of church and state. So the way I always do this is I draw a little. That's supposed to be our mitten. That's not, but. And this is going to be a church. Do you see it?
Yeah.
It's divided, church, state. So the governing body is not tied to the Congregational Church, which is a big deal at the time. They have total religious toleration. They treat the Native Americans well there. He actually paid Native Americans for the land that he purchased. Wow, that's pretty crazy. Yeah.
And Hutchinson ended up there.
Yep, and Hutchinson's going to go from Massachusetts Bay and end up in Rhode Island. Some people think of it as like, just to keep it straight in your head, think of it as like, this is like the Ann Arbor of the New England colonies. It's like very liberal, you know? I was in Ann Arbor the other day and I saw someone, like a couple that was there at a restaurant, and like, I mean, they just looked like total hippies. I'm sure they were very nice people, like big old dreads for the dude. They were wearing like, almost it looked like blanket type things for, I can't describe it. And I was just like, that's so cool. And then I was like, yeah, but you wouldn't, you wouldn't see that in other places that tend to be more conservative, right? So this was seen as the liberal outpost for the New England region, Rhode Island and Connecticut, especially Rhode Island. Any questions? Then the last of them, there's not quite as important, is going to be there's nothing you need to know about New Hampshire. It was originally part of Massachusetts Bay, so don't worry about that. New York, the Duke of York, it was originally a Dutch colony. Did I tell you why they decided to invade New York? Right? This English, they wanted to close the gap, right? They wanted to make it all English. It makes you less vulnerable to invasion and attack. Make it less vulnerable. So New York is invaded. New Jersey, nothing. Oh, Pennsylvania. That's one we definitely gotta know. Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania. William Penn. Quakers. Quakers are known as the Religious Society of Friends. I don't know if I told you that. They had they embraced equality between men and women. And they were friendly to the Native Americans. Although there isn't a single colony in the 13 that will be there that have long-lasting good relations with Native Americans. It just doesn't happen, yeah.
Do we know about the walking purchase?
The what?
The walking purchase?
What do you mean?
Pennsylvania? How like the Quakers were pacifists, so they picked a bunch of runners to make the land, to gain land from the Native Americans.
Oh, yeah. So no, I know your textbook talks about that. How they would measure out land and purchase it, and they would like deceive Native Americans on how much they were taking. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, you're never going to see that in the AP test. You might be able to do it in an essay, but no,
Are
you
they
don't
already
need.
calling for abolition, or is that later?
Say again.
Or are they already like against slavery?
Some of the yeah. So they would be I would say, here in Pennsylvania, as well as these places in Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay, they're going to have the most resistance to slavery at the earliest points. Although there's not abolition movements going on in Plymouth and Massachusetts Bay in the 1600s, it's just not the case. And they're actually like places like Boston, which there's Boston, which is part of the Massachusetts colony. The Massachusetts colony is in general. So it's like saying, there's more open-minded places in Michigan, but not everyone in an open-minded place. Not everyone in Ann Arbor is a liberal hippie, right? So you're going to find, yes, overall, more anti-slavery sentiment in the New England region and in Pennsylvania as well. But you don't have big abolition movements until later on. That's the question, yeah.
There's not many people vote too.
Ooh, good question. Could women vote in Pennsylvania? I don't know if it was that. I don't know. We'd have to look it up. We should look it up. Let me look it up. I have my computer.
There still counts. Is there even voting?
What?
Is there even voting?
Oh, absolutely. There's voting on like local matters, town matters. Should we allot money to this? But they're not electing colonial governors themselves. But yeah, there's definitely voting going on. What did I do with my backpack? Did anyone? Yeah. No. Get out. Oh, here it is. Come on in. But leave. That's good. It's so nice outside today. Hey, look, that's neat. PNSYLVANIA. Unbelievable.
I know. I was like staring at it for a long
It looks like they couldn't vote, Alyssa. Well, it looks like they couldn't vote. It looks like they couldn't vote. On like local matters, so spending money for different things in the town. They would vote on like what to do about certain issues, Native American issues. Yeah. All right. So we did Colonial America. Should we do westward expansion next?
Eddie! Hi, Eddie. Eddie. Oh, we're just going Strapper, how long are you gonna be here?
Till about 3.
Alright, after my race, I'll come down.
Good luck in your race.
It's gonna be really bad.
Strapping, so that's last through Fillmore through 1850. Is that before Knocker breaking out?
Say again?
You put a slash through Fillmore through 1850. Is that before Knocker breaking out?
It means there's really not much cover. Someone asked if we could cover Millard Fillmore.
Really overstepped it, and I kind of fell on my face. But that's like
We're waiting for a couple.